Are you eating foods you think are healthy, like nuts, but still feeling inflamed, tired, gaining weight, or watching your cholesterol numbers creep in the wrong direction? Here's a surprising truth most people over 60 have never been told. Not all nuts are healthy as we age, and a few of them can quietly sabotage your metabolism, your arteries, and even your brain. Here's what's really going on inside your body. After age 60, your metabolism changes in very specific ways. Insulin sensitivity declines. Your liver processes fats differently. Your gut microbiome becomes more fragile. And inflammation, what we call inflammaging, rises even if you eat clean. Now, nuts are often marketed as a superfood. They're natural, they're plant-based, they're packed with fats and minerals. So how could they possibly be harmful? The answer is context. Some nuts spike inflammation. Some overload omega-6 fats. Some stress the liver. And some quietly raise blood sugar and insulin, especially when eaten the wrong way or in the wrong quantities. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your metabolism like a fireplace. When you're younger, you can throw almost any kind of wood on the fire and it burns clean. But as you age, the fire becomes more sensitive. Certain fuels now create smoke instead of warmth. The room fills with inflammation instead of energy. That's exactly what happens with the wrong nuts after 60. On the other hand, and this is the empowering part, a few specific nuts act like metabolic medicine. They improve blood vessel function, they support the immune system, they reduce visceral fat, and research now shows they can actively support longevity and healthy aging when used correctly. Today, I'm going to walk you through 4 nuts you should strongly limit or avoid after 60, and 4 nuts you should intentionally include if your goal is energy, metabolic health, and long-term vitality. We're not talking about fear-based nutrition. We're talking about precision, right food, right amount, right time. And we'll do this the way I always aim to teach, calmly, clearly, and grounded in real physiology, not trends or headlines. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some healthy nuts quietly drive inflammation, how certain nuts affect insulin, cholesterol, and brain health, which nuts actually support longevity pathways like nitric oxide and anti-angiogenic defense, and exactly how to eat the right nuts for maximum benefit without overdoing calories or stressing your system. If this kind of science-based practical guidance is helpful so far, consider subscribing to the channel. I post content like this every day to help you take control of your health naturally, without guesswork and without medication first thinking. Now, before we break down the worst and best nuts one by one, let me give you a clear roadmap of the key insights we're going to cover next. Let's start with the most misunderstood nut of all, the peanut. And I want to be very clear here. Peanuts are not technically nuts, they're legumes. And that distinction matters a lot more after age 60 than most people realize. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, the gut lining becomes more permeable, what's often called leaky gut. At the same time, immune tolerance decreases and low-grade inflammation becomes easier to trigger. Peanuts contain lectins and agglutinins, proteins that bind to the gut lining and can activate immune responses. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your gut lining like a fine mesh filter. When you're younger, it's tight and resilient. Over time, small gaps appear. Lectins act like burrs. They catch, stick, and irritate that mesh. That irritation signals inflammation throughout the body. What the research shows is that peanut lectins can cross the gut barrier and stimulate inflammatory pathways, especially in older adults with compromised digestion. This doesn't always cause obvious allergy symptoms. Instead, it shows up subtly: joint stiffness, brain fog, fatigue, bloating, or stubborn belly fat. Now let's talk metabolism. Peanuts are extremely high in omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-6 fats are not inherently bad, but the ratio matters. After 60, most people already consume far too much omega-6 from vegetable oils, packaged foods, and restaurant meals. When omega-6 intake overwhelms omega-3s, the body shifts toward a pro-inflammatory state. This directly impacts insulin sensitivity, arterial health, and even cognitive function. Here's the key point. Peanuts quietly push that imbalance further. There's also a liver issue most people don't talk about. Peanuts are one of the most common dietary sources of aflatoxins, naturally occurring mold toxins. Even low-level chronic exposure places extra detoxification burden on the liver. And remember, your liver is the command center for fat metabolism, cholesterol balance, and blood sugar regulation. If the liver is stressed, fat burning slows down, triglycerides rise, LDL particles become more oxidized, and inflammation increases. This is why someone can eat healthy, snack on peanuts or peanut butter, and still struggle with weight gain or poor lab markers. Now, does this mean one peanut will destroy your health? Of course not. But for adults over 60, especially those with insulin resistance, arthritis, gut issues, or cardiovascular concerns, peanuts should not be a daily food. And peanut butter? Even more problematic due to oxidation and concentrated fats. The practical protocol is simple. Avoid peanuts as a routine snack. Eliminate peanut oil entirely. If consumed at all, keep it rare and minimal, not habitual. And if this explanation is helping you rethink foods you've trusted for years, take a moment to subscribe. I post science-based guidance like this every day to help you optimize your health naturally, one decision at a time. Next, we'll look at another healthy nut that quietly raises inflammation and blood sugar in seniors, and why portion size alone isn't the real issue. The next nut that causes a lot of quiet metabolic trouble after 60 is the cashew. Cashews are often labeled as heart healthy, and they're commonly added to trail mixes, dairy-free cheeses, and snack bowls. But here's what most people don't realize. Cashews behave very differently in the body compared to other nuts. Here's what's really going on inside your metabolism. Cashews are one of the highest carbohydrate nuts. In fact, nearly 30% of their calories come from carbohydrates, with a meaningful portion converting quickly into glucose. That matters a lot after 60, when insulin sensitivity naturally declines. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine insulin as a key that opens your cells so sugar can get inside. When you're younger, the lock is smooth, the key works easily. As you age, the lock becomes rusty. You now need more insulin to do the same job. Cashews quietly demand more insulin than most people realize. What the research shows is that repeated insulin spikes, even modest ones, push the body out of fat-burning mode and into fat storage mode. Over time, this contributes to visceral fat accumulation, especially around the liver and abdomen. This is why someone can snack on cashews, feel no immediate blood sugar crash, yet still struggle with belly fat and rising A1C numbers. There's another issue: amino acid signaling. Cashews are unusually high in certain amino acids that stimulate insulin release independent of carbohydrates. So even when eaten alone, they can nudge insulin upward, something most seniors are actively trying to avoid. Now let's talk inflammation. Cashews contain moderate levels of omega-6 fats, but more importantly, they are often industrially processed and roasted at high heat. This oxidizes their delicate fats, creating lipid peroxides that increase oxidative stress in the body. After 60, antioxidant defenses decline. That means oxidized fats do more damage, particularly to blood vessels and mitochondria, the energy factories inside your cells. There's also a mineral imbalance issue. Cashews are relatively low in magnesium compared to other nuts, while being higher in copper. Over time, excess copper relative to zinc and magnesium can worsen oxidative stress and impair neurological balance, especially in older adults. This doesn't mean cashews are toxic. It means they are metabolically mismatched for aging physiology. The most common mistake I see is this: people replace cookies or chips with cashews and assume they've made a healthy upgrade. Calories may be similar, but the hormonal response is completely different. The practical protocol looks like this: avoid cashews as a daily snack. Be especially cautious with cashew-based dairy alternatives. If consumed, keep portions very small and pair with protein. Never alone. For most adults over 60 who are trying to improve insulin sensitivity, reduce belly fat, or protect brain health, cashews should be an occasional food, not a staple. Next, we'll look at a nut that's often praised for antioxidants, but may quietly stress the gut and kidneys when eaten regularly in older age. The third nut seniors need to be especially cautious with is the almond. And yes, I know this one surprises a lot of people. Almonds are often considered the gold standard of healthy nuts. They're recommended for heart health, blood sugar balance, and even weight loss. But here's what's really going on inside your body after age 60. The issue isn't almonds themselves, it's how aging physiology responds to them. Almonds are extremely high in oxalates. Oxalates are naturally occurring compounds that bind to minerals like calcium and magnesium. In younger bodies, oxalates are usually handled without issue, but as kidney filtration efficiency declines with age, oxalates can accumulate. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your kidneys like a coffee filter. When it's new, water flows cleanly through. Over time, the filter clogs slightly. If you keep pouring thick sediment through it, oxalates, residue builds up. This is why frequent almond consumption in seniors has been associated with kidney stone risk, joint stiffness, muscle tightness, reduced mineral absorption. Now let's talk gut health. Almond skins contain lectins and enzyme inhibitors designed to protect the seed in nature. In sensitive or aging digestive systems, these compounds can irritate the gut lining and disrupt the microbiome balance. What the research shows is that gut inflammation directly worsens insulin resistance and systemic inflammation, two major drivers of aging-related disease. There's also a calorie density issue most people underestimate. Almonds are easy to overeat. A handful can quickly become 300-400 calories, especially when roasted and salted. For seniors with slower metabolic rates, this excess energy is often stored, not burned. And here's the key metabolic insight. Fat burning shuts down in the presence of constant calorie intake, even if those calories come from healthy foods. Almonds also contain a significant amount of omega-6 fats. Again, omega-6 is not evil, but most seniors already consume too much relative to omega-3. That imbalance fuels low-grade inflammation and arterial stiffness. Now, does this mean almonds are forbidden? No. But they are one of the most commonly overused nuts in adults over 60. The smarter protocol looks like this. Avoid almond flour and almond-based snacks. Skip almond milk as a daily beverage. If eating almonds, choose small portions, soak them overnight, and remove the skins. Soaking reduces oxalates and lectins, making them far gentler on the gut and kidneys. And if this is reshaping how you think about healthy foods, consider subscribing to the channel. I post daily, evidence-based guidance to help you avoid hidden metabolic traps and build real, sustainable health as you age. Next, we'll cover the final nut you should strongly limit, one that often looks innocent but may quietly stress the brain and blood vessels over time. The fourth nut seniors should strongly limit is the Brazil nut, and this one is dangerous precisely because it's often marketed as a superfood. Brazil nuts are famous for selenium, an essential mineral involved in thyroid function, immune defense, and antioxidant protection. But here's what's really going on inside your body after 60. With selenium, more is not better. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of selenium like medication. At the right dose, it heals. At a slightly higher dose, it becomes toxic. There is a very narrow therapeutic window. One single Brazil nut can contain anywhere from 70 to over 300 micrograms of selenium, depending on the soil it was grown in. The recommended daily intake for adults is about 55 micrograms. The upper safe limit is 400 micrograms. Do the math. 2 or 3 Brazil nuts, especially consumed regularly, can push seniors into chronic selenium excess, a condition called selenosis. What the research shows is that excess selenium can cause fatigue and brain fog, hair thinning and brittle nails, digestive upset, worsening insulin resistance, increased oxidative stress over time. This is especially concerning in older adults whose detoxification pathways and kidney clearance are less efficient. There's also a cardiovascular issue most people aren't aware of. Some studies suggest that chronically high selenium levels may increase the risk of type 2 diabetes and negatively impact lipid metabolism when intake exceeds physiological needs. Again, this isn't about deficiency, it's about excess. Brazil nuts also contain a high amount of polyunsaturated fats, which are more prone to oxidation. If the nuts are old, improperly stored, or roasted, those fats can generate oxidative byproducts that damage blood vessels and mitochondria. And because Brazil nuts are often eaten sporadically, a few here, a few there, people don't realize how much selenium they're accumulating over time. The practical protocol is very clear. Do not eat Brazil nuts daily. If consumed at all, limit to 1 nut once or twice per week. Never use Brazil nuts as a regular snack. If someone truly needs selenium support, it's far safer to assess intake holistically, including diet and supplements, rather than relying on a food with such unpredictable dosing. Now, this is the turning point. We've covered the 4 nuts that most often quietly harm metabolic and inflammatory health after 60 when eaten routinely. Next, we're going to flip the script. I'll show you 4 nuts that function more like metabolic allies than snacks. Nuts that support blood flow, reduce inflammation, protect the brain, and activate longevity pathways when used correctly. And the first one may surprise you, because it directly supports one of the most powerful anti-aging systems in the human body. The first nut I do want most adults over 60 to intentionally include is the walnut. And this one earns its place not because it's trendy, but because it directly supports vascular health, brain function, and inflammation control, 3 systems that determine how well you age. Here's what's really going on inside your body. Walnuts are the highest plant-based nut source of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA. After 60, omega-3 intake becomes critical because the body's ability to counterbalance inflammation naturally declines. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Inflammation is like friction in an engine. A little is normal. Too much causes wear and tear. Omega-3 fats act like oil. They reduce friction, protect delicate parts, and keep systems running smoothly. What the research shows is that regular walnut consumption is associated with reduced systemic inflammation, improved endothelial function, the lining of blood vessels, better lipid particle profiles, slower cognitive decline. One large body of research links walnuts to improved nitric oxide signaling, the molecule that allows blood vessels to relax and deliver oxygen and nutrients to tissues, including the brain and heart. This matters enormously after 60, when arterial stiffness becomes one of the biggest drivers of fatigue, high blood pressure, and cognitive decline. There's also a gut-brain connection here. Walnuts contain polyphenols that feed beneficial gut bacteria. Those bacteria, in turn, produce short-chain fatty acids that calm inflammation and support insulin sensitivity. In other words, walnuts don't just nourish you, they nourish your microbiome, which then works on your behalf. Now let's address a common concern: calories. Yes, walnuts are calorie-dense, but here's the key metabolic insight. Walnuts improve satiety hormones. They reduce ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and improve leptin signaling, which helps your brain sense fullness. This is why walnuts, when eaten intentionally, do not promote weight gain in most seniors and may actually support fat loss by stabilizing appetite and insulin. The correct protocol matters. Here's how to use walnuts therapeutically. Portion about 1 small handful per day. Timing, best with meals, not as a late-night snack. Form, raw or lightly dry roasted, never heavily roasted. Pairing, excellent with leafy greens, vegetables, or protein. If you struggle with digestion, soaking walnuts for a few hours can improve tolerance. The big takeaway is this: walnuts support blood flow, brain health, and inflammation control simultaneously, a rare combination that makes them especially valuable after 60. Next, we'll look at another nut that acts almost like a natural cholesterol and blood sugar regulator, and why it's one of the best snacks for metabolic health when used correctly. The second nut I strongly recommend for adults over 60 is the pistachio. And metabolically speaking, this is one of the most underrated foods for healthy aging. Pistachios are unique because they support blood sugar control, cholesterol balance, and vascular function all at the same time, and they do so gently without stressing insulin. Here's what's really going on inside your body. As we age, the biggest driver of metabolic decline isn't calories. It's loss of insulin flexibility. Your body becomes slower to switch between burning glucose and burning fat. Pistachios help restore some of that flexibility. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Think of your metabolism like a hybrid car. When it can smoothly switch between gas and electric, it runs efficiently. When that switching system breaks down, fuel economy suffers. Pistachios help keep that metabolic switch responsive. What the research shows is that pistachios have a very low glycemic impact, even when eaten with carbohydrate-containing meals. In fact, studies demonstrate that adding pistachios to a meal can reduce the overall blood sugar response of that meal. This is especially important for seniors with prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, or stubborn abdominal fat. Now let's talk cholesterol, but in a more sophisticated way. Pistachios improve LDL particle size and oxidation status, not just total LDL numbers. That's critical because small, dense, oxidized LDL particles are the ones that actually damage arteries. Pistachios are rich in plant sterols, compounds that naturally block cholesterol absorption in the gut. They also contain potassium and magnesium, which support blood pressure regulation and vascular tone. There's also a powerful eye-brain connection here. Pistachios contain lutein and zeaxanthin, carotenoids that accumulate in the retina and brain. These compounds protect against oxidative stress and are linked to better cognitive performance and visual acuity as we age. Another advantage is portion control. Because pistachios are often eaten in the shell, they naturally slow eating speed. This improves satiety signaling and reduces overeating, something very few foods do automatically. The practical protocol: portion, 1 small handful per day. Best timing: midday or with meals. Choose unsalted or lightly salted, dry roasted. Avoid pistachio desserts or sugar-coated versions. One more key insight: pistachios support nitric oxide production, which improves blood flow to muscles and the brain. That translates to better energy, endurance, and mental clarity. Not just better lab numbers. If you're over 60 and looking for a nut that genuinely supports metabolic health without pushing insulin or inflammation, pistachios are one of the smartest choices you can make. Next, we'll move to a nut that plays a powerful role in immune defense and longevity, especially through its effect on blood vessels and anti-aging pathways. The third nut that earns a strategic place in a longevity-focused diet after 60 is the hazelnut. Hazelnuts don't get nearly as much attention as walnuts or almonds, but metabolically, they are exceptionally well suited for aging physiology, especially when it comes to oxidative stress, insulin signaling, and cardiovascular protection. Here's what's really going on inside your body. After age 60, one of the biggest hidden accelerators of aging is oxidative damage. This is damage caused by unstable molecules that injure blood vessels, mitochondria, and DNA. Your body has antioxidant systems to neutralize this, but those systems weaken with age. Hazelnuts are uniquely rich in vitamin E, particularly alpha-tocopherol, one of the most important fat-soluble antioxidants for protecting cell membranes. Let me explain this with a simple analogy. Imagine your cells are tiny balloons filled with energy. Oxidative stress is like tiny needles poking holes in those balloons. Vitamin E acts like a protective coating that prevents those punctures. What the research shows is that higher vitamin E intake from whole foods is associated with reduced arterial stiffness, better endothelial function, slower cognitive decline, lower markers of oxidative inflammation. Hazelnuts also have a very favorable fat profile. They are rich in monounsaturated fats, similar to olive oil. These fats improve insulin sensitivity and help the liver process fats more efficiently, a key issue for seniors struggling with fatty liver, elevated triglycerides, or low energy. There's also a nervous system benefit. Hazelnuts contain B vitamins, including B6 and folate, which support neurotransmitter balance and homocysteine metabolism. Elevated homocysteine is a known risk factor for cognitive decline and vascular disease in older adults. Another overlooked advantage is digestibility. Compared to many other nuts, hazelnuts are lower in anti-nutrients and tend to be gentler on the gut. For seniors with sensitive digestion, bloating, or reflux, hazelnuts are often better tolerated. The practical protocol: portion, 10-15 hazelnuts. Timing: with meals or as part of a Mediterranean-style plate. Form: raw or lightly roasted, pair with vegetables, olive oil, fish, or yogurt. Avoid hazelnut spreads with sugar and refined oils. Those negate the benefits. The key takeaway is this: hazelnuts protect the aging body at the cellular level, reducing oxidative stress while supporting insulin and vascular health. Next, we'll cover the final nut, one that plays a surprisingly powerful role in immune defense, nitric oxide production, and anti-aging biology. And then we'll bring everything together in a clear, actionable conclusion. The fourth and final nut I want you to intentionally include after 60 is the macadamia nut. And from a metabolic perspective, this may be the most misunderstood, yet most protective nut for aging bodies. Here's what's really going on inside your physiology. As we age, one of the biggest threats to metabolic health isn't fat. It's oxidized fat and insulin overstimulation. Macadamia nuts solve both problems elegantly. Macadamias are exceptionally high in monounsaturated fats and extremely low in omega-6 fatty acids. In fact, they have one of the lowest omega-6 contents of any nut. Let me explain why that matters with a simple analogy. Inflammation is like a fire. Omega-6 fats are dry kindling. Omega-3s and monounsaturated fats are fire regulators. They keep flames controlled. After 60, most people are already swimming in omega-6 from processed foods. Adding more is like throwing gasoline on the fire. Macadamias don't do that. What the research shows is that diets rich in monounsaturated fats improve insulin sensitivity, reduce triglycerides, lower oxidative stress, support mitochondrial energy production. This makes macadamias especially valuable for seniors dealing with fatigue, stubborn weight, or metabolic slowdown. There's also a brain and nerve benefit. Macadamias contain palmitoleic acid, a rare fatty acid that acts as a metabolic signaling molecule. It improves communication between fat tissue, liver, and muscles, helping the body burn fat more efficiently instead of storing it. They're also very gentle on digestion, low in lectins, low in oxalates, and rarely trigger bloating or gut irritation. This makes macadamias an ideal nut for keto or low-carb diets, insulin-resistant seniors with sensitive digestion. Anyone trying to stabilize energy levels. The practical protocol. Portion, 8-12 macadamia nuts. Timing, with meals or as a fat source during fasting windows. Form, raw or dry roasted. Avoid honey roasted or sugar-coated versions. Macadamias act less like a snack and more like metabolic fuel that doesn't disrupt hormones. And that's the core theme of everything we've discussed today.